Sidney Godley was born on the 14th of August 1889 in East Grinstead, Sussex, to a working-class family. When he was 7, his mother died, and he was sent to live with his aunt and uncle in London. He left school at 14 and worked as an ironmonger for 6 years. At the age of 20, likely bored by the drudgery of working life, Sidney signed up with the Royal Fusiliers City of London Regiment in the British Army. 1909 was an interesting time in British and world history, as the Pax Britannica, which had endured for almost a century, was coming to an end. World War I was its death knell, and saw the now 25-year-old Private Godley thrust into action with the British Expeditionary Force in Mons, Belgium. The First Battle of Mons was the first big engagement of World War I, and was a subsidiary action of the Battle of Frontiers, in which the French, Belgian and British allies attempted to halt the unrelenting German advance on the French-Belgian border. The Mons dawn on the 23rd of August was signalled with an artillery bombardment from the east, and swiftly followed by columns of advancing Germans. The goal for the Royal Fusiliers was to hold the 2 bridges on the Mons-Condé Canal against the numerically superior German forces. A company of the 4th Battalion, led by Maurice Dease and containing Sidney Godley, were tasked with holding the Nimy bridge. Maurice Dease was only 24 himself and younger than Godley, despite being his superior in rank. Dease was an Irish-born professional soldier from noble lineage and a graduate of the Royal Military College at Sandhurst, and thus would have lived a very different life to Sidney Godley, whom Dease deemed to be the least capable of all the soldiers in his company. But despite the different worlds and different levels of capability, the events which were about to take place on the 23rd of August saw the 2 men immortalised together. Early German advances were repulsed due to the intense machine gun and rifle fire from the Fusiliers, but as the morning progressed, the Germans abandoned the columns in favour of a looser formation and began edging closer to the Nimy bridge. Although the machine guns were well positioned for cutting down waves of attacking troops, they were obvious targets for shells and sharpshooters, and one by one the machine gun crews were knocked out. Maurice Dease, leading from the front, made multiple trips from the shelter of the British trench through the barrage of German bullets and shells to each incapacitated machine gun post, as the dead machine gunners had to be physically removed so that a substitute may fill their place. Dease was badly wounded on these journeys, but insisted on remaining at duty as long as one of his crew could fire. As the day progressed, it became apparent that the German advance could not be stopped, and the focus became on ensuring a safe fighting retreat for the BEF troops. At this fateful hour, the commanding officer, Lieutenant Steele, asked the last few troops in Dease's company if anyone knew how to man the machine guns. This was an obvious death sentence, as by now the Germans were right on the canal bank, and enemy fire was at its strongest whilst machine gun ammunition was at its lowest. However, Lieutenant Dease and Private Godley both gallantly stepped forwards, likely well aware of what lay in store for them. Under heavy fire, the unlikely pair took their positions in the 2 blood-spattered Vickers machine gun emplacements. Godley had to remove 3 dead bodies to take up his position. The 2 men then rained fire on the approaching Germans and ensured the safe retreat of the Fusiliers that day. Dease was killed after a few minutes, but Godley continued on for 2 hours until evening was drawing in. Despite being shot in the head and the back, he only stopped firing when his ammunition was spent and the Germans were pretty much upon his position. And with the enemy within spitting distance and his bullets spent, his last defiant act was to dismantle the gun and throw the pieces in the canal. He then attempted to crawl to safety and was apprehended by the Germans and taken as a prisoner of war. Against all odds, Godley survived and spent the rest of the Great War in squalid conditions in a prisoner of war camp. He never fully recovered from his injuries and suffered in poverty for most of his life, working as a school caretaker in London, before dying at the age of 68. Godley and Dease posthumously of course, both received the Victoria Cross, the highest and most prestigious decoration of the British Armed Forces. The selfless acts of two men from very different worlds on that day, both with very little regard for their own lives but maximum commitment to those of their company, are now forever etched into the annals of history and seal their joint immortal status.